Hi, my name is Scott Gibson with Beneath the Surface. I'm here with Jim Letourneau of the Big Picture Speculator. Jim, thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
Now, Big Picture Speculator, why don't you give us some comments on the big picture right now, what your take is?
Well, I had someone send me an image of a chart of the TSX Venture Exchange that shows that it's up a whole 25% over the last 10 years. But it also had the price of oil, the price of copper, the price of gold, I believe the price of silver. And those commodities as an average are up almost 5 times. So that's making it a really tough sell to get anyone really interested in junior mining companies at the moment, because historically, at least as of now, they've dramatically underperformed.
Well, especially looking back since the high of March last year, the junior mining, as indicated by the TSX Venture Index, is down 50%. So a lot of people have lost money. They're not too anxious to be putting more money in.
Exactly.
So what's your take on gold and gold stocks going forward?
We're getting close to a bottom, and there are a lot of economic scenarios where a flight to safety could happen, and we're close to that. And that could be extremely bullish for precious metals, and we may have just a very narrow, maybe it'll only be gold and silver that do well. That's one possible scenario, but the long-term charts of the big silver producers are looking, they've pulled back for a long time. They're looking very enticing right now, and that may not be, maybe another 3 months, 6 months, but they're not going to go to zero. There is some base level of economic activity out there that requires these metals. People still buy stuff. They may buy less, but there's still a base level. So I'm actually getting more and more bullish as the worse things get. I'm getting more and more optimistic.
No, and that's wise. Right now, especially with the majors, they're producing, they're cash flow positive, they're in production. The stocks have come back a fair bit, but we see typically those stocks start to move before the mid-tiers and before the juniors.
Okay, yeah.
And what's your expectation there? Have you seen a bit of a bounce here in some of the majors, or is it?
I haven't seen one yet, or I haven't seen the volume coming in, so it's hard to say if the trend is changing now or if it's going to take a little longer, but I would wait for some volume. But then we could see some really, I think the consensus here is there were far too many junior mining companies with projects that probably didn't have a lot of merit other than they were catching a hot commodity, or I like to call it periodic table bingo. And then we have small companies that will actually, we'll spin off another company of our secondary project because we'll get more value for it. But it sort of speaks to the fact that maybe a lot of the juniors were overvalued for what they had. If you do a property option and maybe put up $500,000, what would justify a market cap of several $1 million for something like that? Unless you were a really good management team and had all the other secret sauce things that would make it sexy. And there's still a lot of junior companies with market caps under 10 million, over 5 million that I can't really see what they're going to do. So there's still room for a lot of the weaker ones to fall out, which would be really helpful.
It would be. And cash, that's the thing I'd like you to comment on. That a lot of the companies don't have cash, and they're not able to do financings. There's maybe one company that's gone public here in the last 3 to 6 months in the junior mining space. What's your take on sort of the cash positions and when the money might start coming back to the market?
Well, someone was pointing out yesterday, whenever you see a financing for a few $100,000, it's just so they can pay their salaries. None of that money is going to actually benefit shareholders. And that's the bottom line is, if they don't have the cash now, they're going to have a really hard time getting it. And of course, the more you need it, the harder it is to get and the more onerous the terms. So if a company has cash, that's a big plus. Although there are many ways that cash can disappear and not create value for shareholders. But we like to be optimistic and positive and think that some of them will make something out of it.
And what have you been hearing in terms of the industry of the hardships some of the companies are going through having lack of cash, in terms of layoffs or?
Yeah, they're starting to have to cut expenses as any business would that didn't have money, and it's getting tough for geologists out there that they just want to go out and bang on rocks, and so the exploration budgets are a lot smaller. It'll cut into the discovery cycle. It may end up prolonging the bull market. Anytime we have a big meltdown like we had in 2008, even really good projects, mine development and everything, the financing locks up and nothing advances, and that means that supply is delayed by a year or 2 or 3. So it's a tough business right now.
It really is. Well, what are you looking at right now in terms of particular companies? Is there a few that you like?
Well, part of me is wondering whether I should invest in juniors at all, because as Jim Rogers said, it's very hard to outperform the price of the commodity by investing in stocks, because once you invest in a stock, you have extra risk. You have country risk, you have production risk, management risk, all sorts of things can go wrong with a silver producer that won't happen to the price of silver. However, since we're at a mining conference, and I like to think that I'm smarter than average, silver juniors are interesting because when silver takes off, and everybody's sort of waiting for it, but if that gets that excitement, it's not happening today, but if we get that everyone wants to buy silver phase happening, they really skyrocket. And there are a lot of good gold juniors out there as well. I mean, we're starting to see some winnowing out of the weaker ones, and when that happens, right, if the price of gold turns, and I think we're getting close, and the price of silver turns, and if there's right now there's a lot of fear and uncertainty, it'll be seen as a flight to safety. And of course it won't be after a year or two, but right now you want to buy when no one wants to buy. And it's probably one of the best opportunities I've seen in the last 5 years.
Now in 2008, just phenomenal opportunities. And you look at 2008, coming off that bottom, significant amounts of money were made by the gutsy investors, the smart investors that took advantage of that opportunity. Do you have any particular companies that you'd like to mention that you think are really good right now, or are you sort of advising stay in cash mostly right now and then be very selective?
I would be selective, and I would scale in at, maybe if you were going to invest $100, you could invest $25 now and then wait and see. And then you'll actually end up hoping for things to get worse, because you'll still have $75 that you can invest at lower prices. And that's the one thing I would suggest. Don't go all in now, but if you have cash, start to deploy it.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Jim. Again, that's Jim Letourneau, the Big Picture Speculator. My name is Scott Gibson with Beneath the Surface. Thanks for being with us.